everyone, and welcome. Some of the stories we have for you right now. Bracing for impact. Donald Trump confirms sweeping tariffs will hit Canada at 12:01 a.m. Eastern.
The tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow.
Why the U.S. president says there's no road left for another truce.
It's scary as an auto worker. It's part of the emotional roller coaster of being an auto worker.
Anger and anxiety, how Canadian cities reliant on industry and trade are reacting.
With this White House, weakness is a provocation.
The Trump factor on the narrowing Liberal leadership race.
Slava Ukraine.
It's a reminder to not let hate go unchecked.
Plus, politics played a supporting role at the Oscars, but we'll tell you why the youth factor stole the show.
CTV National News with Sandy Ronaldo.
No room left for a deal. The U.S. president made it clear this afternoon there is no reprieve this time for Canada or Mexico to stave off tariffs. At 12:01 a.m. Eastern, unless there's an 11th hour stay, Canada will be dealing with 25% tariffs across the board and a 10% levy on Canadian energy. CTV's Judy Trin is in Washington. And Judy, despite the charm offensive moves by Canada to secure the border, Donald Trump has said it's a done deal. No ifs, buts, or ands. It's a done deal.
Sandy, Donald Trump, before he became president, he was a reality TV star who understood the power of a cliffhanger. So for the past month or so, every Canadian official and business person has been waiting to see, has been parsing his language to see whether or not there was a way of avoiding tariffs. That's not going to happen. Take a listen.
With tariffs, is there any room left for Canada and Mexico to make a deal before midnight? And should we expect those Chinese tariffs, the extra 10%, to take effect tomorrow?
No room left for Mexico or for Canada. No, the tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow. They can't come in and steal our money and steal our jobs and take our factories and take our businesses and expect not to be punished. And they're being punished by tariffs.
Now, we're anticipating a reaction, obviously, and what are we hearing in terms of what Canadians are saying, Canadian political officials?
Sandy, at this hour, there is an emergency cabinet meeting involving the ministers responsible for the Canada-U.S. economic relations file. So we are hoping to get comment when they come out of that. But I can tell you that there is widespread frustration. There is a belief within the cabinet that they have done all that they could to meet those fentanyl markers. Now, originally, Donald Trump said this pause and this latest round of tariffs was linked to what Canada did in regards to fentanyl. Well, Canada according to U.S. data, is responsible for roughly 0.02%. So 0.2% of the total amount of fentanyl that crosses the border. And even that small amount has been reduced in recent weeks. We've seen the RCMP, and CBSA showcase the seizures they've made during various raids. We've also appointed a fentanyl czar, and we've also labeled 7 drug cartels as terrorist entities in line with the U.S. But that has not been enough for the Trump administration. Take a listen to Foreign Minister Melanie Joly.
If Trump is imposing tariffs, we're ready. We are ready with $155 billion worth of tariffs, and we're ready with the first tranche of tariffs, which is $30 billion, which is already known.
So just in a few hours, Sandy, this could all come to a head.
Okay, Judy. Judy's in Washington. Okay, as Judy said, the tariffs will go into effect on virtually all Canadian goods. Now, we're talking forestry, farming, to name just a few. And there's already been a response from Ontario Premier Doug Ford. Speaking to American media, he threatened to stop the supply of nickel and electricity to the United States. The auto sector has also been watching and waiting for those U.S. tariffs. And today, Donald Trump talked about bringing the entire auto sector back to the U.S. CTV's Heather Wright is in Windsor, the automotive capital of Canada. All right, Heather, what's been the reaction today in that city?
Well, people here are nervous, Sandy. There is a great deal of uncertainty. The head of the Chamber of Commerce here said the whole region is on pins and needles and calls this really an existential threat to the city of Windsor. As you mentioned, this is the car capital of Canada. It is one of the most trade-reliant cities in the entire country, and you can see why. That is Detroit, Michigan right there. This city produces a lot of cars, a lot of automobiles. It also produces auto parts and agricultural goods that flow across this border. And as we've been talking about over the last several months, when a sector like the auto industry is as integrated, as connected as it is, an auto part might cross this border multiple times in the manufacturing process. And so this city is very nervous. We spoke to the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce earlier, who has been on that charm offensive as well, trying to convince counterparts in the United States that not only will this hurt Canada, it will hurt the United States as well.
Knowing how integrated our two economies are and speaking to the businesses of our community, this doesn't make economic sense. This is going to hurt both of us. It's going to hurt Canada. It's going to hurt the United States. Anything that is negative here is going to be negative there.
And so there had been hope that perhaps there might be another pause. People here in this city bracing for those tariffs to come into effect at midnight. Sandy.
Okay, Heather in Windsor. Now, the race to secure critical minerals, those precious metals that power so much of our technology, appears to be driving much of Donald Trump's foreign policy. Today, the largest mining convention in the world got underway in Toronto, and critical minerals are the hot topic. CTV's John Vanavali-Rao is at that event today. And John, what are people telling you?
Sandy, there is a feeling of unease and uncertainty at this conference, which is massive, drawing more than 25,000 attendees from more than 130 countries. Mining, of course, plays a huge role in the Canadian economy, employing almost 750,000 people. Those gathered here represent miners, the companies that service and build mines, and involved in exploration for things like copper and uranium, nickel and potash. The tariff threat has some wondering how it'll affect their bottom line, how they can honor existing contracts, and could it make some projects too costly to proceed?
Certainly people are worried. Tariffs mean that the cost of building mining projects are going up, and that's something that is very worrisome in an environment where people have been struggling with inflation. There's a great deal of concern about what it means, and frankly, a lot of people are trying to put the pieces together.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford spoke at the conference, vowing to find ways to bring critical minerals to market without getting tied up in red tape.
We need to take advantage of the incredible resources we have here in Ontario, our abundant mineral wealth, every critical mineral in the world. They need it, we have it, they want it, and we'll make sure we deliver it.
Of course, the U.S. president has talked a lot about critical minerals, wanting to secure them from places like Ukraine, Greenland, and Canada. He's proposed a lower 10% tariff on critical minerals, but producers say that would still add substantially to the cost. And everyone here will be paying very close attention to what happens tomorrow. Sandy.
Okay, John, thank you. Okay, time for us to bring in CTV's chief political correspondent, Vashi Kapelas, for some analysis, Vashi, on the chaos and the unpredictability coming out of the Oval Office. Now, markets are already tanking. We're talking a triple-digit loss. Is there room for an 11th hour reprieve at this point?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Sandy, substantially tanking, right? Which is initially what happened a month ago when the original set of tariffs were set to come into play. And a lot of people who have previously worked for Donald Trump in interviews on this network said that they thought that it was that tanking initially of the markets that ultimately informed his decision to press pause for 30 days. So I think your question is a prescient one. And the short answer is, unfortunately, I don't know, because as we both know, Donald Trump is incredibly unpredictable. So I don't think it's impossible, right? A month ago, you'll remember those 2 phone calls with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that ultimately resulted in a 30-day delay. Yes, President Trump is being unequivocal in his comments at this moment in time, but he is known to change those comments over time, and there are still a number of hours before midnight strikes. So I wouldn't take it completely off the table, but certainly he was speaking very specifically this afternoon.
Okay, Vashi, we heard in Judy's report, Melanie Joly saying that Canada's ready for this, but she still has to talk to the Prime Minister. So what does that mean? Does that mean counter tariffs will go into effect tomorrow?
Well, all of that is what we're trying to ascertain. At this very moment, that cabinet meeting just broke, and now the Prime Minister, in any moment, is scheduled to meet with that council that was set up to advise the federal government on how to navigate the possibility of these tariffs. So we are awaiting word from the federal government out of those meetings as to when exactly the counter tariffs would come into effect. You would assume, because they are at the ready, and they have been for the last month, that if in fact Donald Trump follows through and tonight at midnight or overnight at midnight his tariffs come into effect, that ours subsequently will as well. But so far the government has not explicitly confirmed that timeline, so we're watching very closely.
Okay, and the opposition obviously watching very closely as well. What are they saying about the tariffs and the counter tariffs?
Yeah, we've reached out to both the NDP and the Conservatives. We're hearing back that they will, at least in the Tories' case, wait until for certain the tariffs have come into effect. But both have been very critical of Donald Trump taking this action. And more specifically, yesterday, the leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, was specific about what the federal government should do with revenue they end up collecting through counter tariffs. It could end up obviously being very substantial. He says that they should cut taxes in order to create kind of a better investment area or arena in Canada, and other parties are talking about doing other things, so we're looking for clarity from the feds on that too, Sandy.
All right, as always, Vashi, thank you so much. Now, as Vashi said, the Prime Minister is back home in Ottawa, but early today, Justin Trudeau met with King Charles at his Sandringham estate. No word on what exactly was discussed during the private audience. The King has not publicly commented on Donald Trump's threats to annex Canada. Trudeau had promised to discuss issues that matter to Canadians with the monarch. In other news, Donald Trump had more sharp words for the president of Ukraine today after Volodymyr Zelensky said the end of the war with Russia is very, very far away. Trump called it, quote, the worst statement Zelensky could make, adding this guy doesn't want there to be peace as long as he has America's backing. Zelensky says he wants to work with the U.S., saying it's very important that we try to make our diplomacy really substantive to end this war. People left flowers and candles outside the Rome hospital where the Pope has suffered a new breathing crisis. The Vatican says Pope Francis is back to using an oxygen mask and ventilator, but added he remains alert and focused. The setback comes 17 days after the 88-year-old was admitted with a complex lung infection. And at least 2 people are dead and several others were injured after a car drove into a crowd in Germany. It happened in Mannheim, and the driver has been arrested. Police say the suspect is a 40-year-old German man who did not appear to be politically motivated. Now, firefighters are also scrambling to contain raging wildfires that have erupted in North and South Carolina. The largest fire near Myrtle Beach exploded in size overnight, forcing people to flee their homes. Gusty winds and unusually dry conditions are fueling the flames. South Carolina has declared a state of emergency, and a statewide ban on outdoor fires remains in effect. Coming up after the break, the tariff factor in the race to replace Justin Trudeau.
I will impose a dollar-for-dollar retaliation.
How it's completely shaping the final days of campaigning. Donald Trump's tariffs are front and center in the race to replace Justin Trudeau. Decision day is Sunday, and that is when we will learn who will be Canada's next Liberal leader and Prime Minister. Today, a former Conservative Prime Minister weighed in on the race. CTV's Rachel Aiello has been tracking the voting. And how is it going, Rachel? And tell us about those comments.
Sandy, former Prime Minister Stephen Harper is calling out one contender as the 4 hopefuls vying to replace Prime Minister Justin Trudeau do what they can to lock in Liberal votes before Sunday.
We can win this. We will win this.
Touting her track record during the last round of Canada-U.S. trade tensions, today, Chrystia Freeland's campaign stop was focused on the threat of a redo.
If this trade war happens, a government led by me will be there.
Her main rival, Mark Carney, has also positioned himself as best placed to stick handle the economic fallout from tariffs.
We've had some experience with crises and building stronger economies.
But today, former Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper called into question some of those credentials, blasting Carney, who he tapped to run the Bank of Canada back in 2008, for overstating his role in steering Canada through the global financial crisis. In a letter, Harper accused Carney of taking credit for things he had little or nothing to do with back then, asserting that the hard calls were made by former Finance Minister, the late Jim Flaherty. Responding to these remarks, Carney's campaign accused Harper of engaging in revisionist history to save Pierre Poilievre. And with just days to go, some Liberals say they're running into problems with the party's app verification process. Voting opened last week. Of the 400,000 registered Liberals, the party says 100,000 people have completed the verification process and 78,000 votes have been cast so far. The party says the system is working as it should to ensure a secure vote, and that there's a team working to troubleshoot cases where members' information doesn't match with what's on file, similar to what can happen in a general election. Sandy?
Okay, Rachel, thank you. A sports legend is serving up some major excitement for Canada's first WNBA team. The Toronto Tempo announced today that tennis icon Serena Williams will be part of its ownership group. The sports star says it's about showcasing the true value and potential of female athletes. As part of her role, Williams will take an active part in jersey designs and merchandise collaborations. The Tempo begin playing in 2026. And a private lunar lander is beaming back stellar new views of the moon after a successful touchdown. Firefly Aerospace's Blue Ghost is carrying a drill, a vacuum, and other tools to conduct experiments for NASA. Several Canadian-based technologies are also along for the ride, including a GPS-like navigation system created in Quebec. Still ahead, policing protocols under fire, investigating whether tasers played a role in 2 separate deaths. Global Affairs says 2 Canadians have died in Mexico, but has not disclosed many details, citing privacy concerns. In a statement, the department says it is aware of the deaths and consular officials are in contact with local authorities. Media reports say 2 Canadians were found dead inside a home along Mexico's west coast, while another person was sent to hospital with injuries. Now, 2 people in Halifax have died within a week after being tasered by police. The Elizabeth Fry Society of Nova Scotia is calling for major changes in police procedures. CTV's Paul Hollingsworth is in Halifax. Paul, tell us what happened.
Sandy, police say this was a mental health episode that led to the use of a taser. Police were called to this suburban Halifax neighborhood on Friday night. They say the 37-year-old man became aggressive and a taser was then used. When he was in custody, his health began to decline and he later died in hospital. This was the second death in 1 week involving a person in Halifax police custody who was tasered. The Elizabeth Fry Society of Mainland Nova Scotia says it's time to eliminate the practice of law enforcement officers using tasers.
Tasers kill people. Tasers kill mentally ill people in particular, and they should not be used.
Halifax police said in a statement, due to the death of the male, the Serious Incident Response Team has assumed responsibility for this investigation. CTV News public safety analyst and former OPP Commissioner Chris Lewis says the province's CERT investigation could take a while.
Their job is to determine whether or not there was criminal action occurred by police.
But I feel like the minimum that could be done is a recognition that what happened was not okay, that families lost loved ones.
The Elizabeth Fry Society of Mainland Nova Scotia is calling for numerous changes in policing procedures. They want mental health experts involved and not have police take the lead in wellness checks. Sandy.
CTV's Paul Hollingsworth. After the break, golden moments at the Oscars. The soaring highs, the snubs, and the surprises. Well, if you watched the Oscars last night, you know that the big winner at the 97th Academy Awards was the film Honora, a Cinderella story with a twist, a sex trade worker marrying the son of a Russian oligarch. The small independent film that is taking home 5 Oscars. CTV's film critic Richard Krause is with us now. Richard, I want to talk first about the host, Conan O'Brien. That was his first rodeo, and he spoke about that quite a bit in a funny way. What did you think of his hosting abilities?
Oh, I thought he was terrific. I thought that he was self-deprecating, which meant that he could make a joke about himself and then go after someone in the audience and not have someone rush the stage and punch him in the face, as we saw, a couple of years ago. I think that he kept the show rolling along. It's a behemoth. It's a 3 hour and 45-minute show, and he made that feel maybe not short, but certainly shorter than it actually was, and that was because of him.
Well, I paid attention to the big winners, anticipating The Brutalist, Wicked would walk away with a lot. Honora, surprised that it did as well as it did?
Well, that was always my choice when I make up my list. I always have the will win and should win, and Honora was always in the should win. It's a terrific movie, really lovely performances in it, and I think it benefited from having a much younger voter group in the Academy now. A number of years ago, the Academy decided that they were, too old, the members were not diverse enough, and they weren't international enough. They remedied all that by adding thousands of new members, and it's changing the movies that win. And I think Honora, with its young, skewing star, Mikey Madison here is only 25 years old. I think she appealed to those voters, and that went a long way towards Honora getting 5 out of the 6 awards it was nominated for.
And Canadians among the Oscar winners, and one of them associated with the best film, Honora.
Yeah, from Vancouver, you've got Samantha Kwan, who is the producer of Honora, and she spoke yesterday. You also have, from Vancouver, 2 of the special effects wizards from Dune Part 2. They made it seem that, those sandworms in the film, which are such a big part of the book, they made them look real. They made them jump off the screen. Their names are Stephen James and Reese Solcombe, and they did amazing work and were, really well compensated in terms of winning a Best Oscar for their work, because honestly, that movie is spectacular looking.
I agree with you on that one. Okay, thanks, Richard. And thank you for sharing your time with us. I'm Sandy Ronaldo. Omar is here later, but first, your local CTV News is coming up. We'll see you tomorrow, we hope. Bye for now.